Ladies and gentlemen, we're back again with another episode. Today we've got somebody who's an awesome journalist who's been doing really cool and fun stuff. And right now she's got a podcast called Hazard New Jersey, where she talks about toxic waste and the cleanup, corporate malfeasance, which we like to talk about on the show. We have Jordan Gass Pooré.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm not in New Jersey right now. I don't live in New Jersey. I live in New York City, but I go to New Jersey a lot.
Okay, so you're in New York now, but born in Texas, and now currently smearing the good name of New Jersey.
I wouldn't say smearing it. I have actually had a lot more respect for New Jersey after doing this podcast. Yeah. Like, I have learned a lot, and I appreciate the state way more. And I actually have a lot more respect for the state of New Jersey than I do for the state of Texas, for a lot of reasons. But, New Jersey is actually not a bad place.
Huh.
It does smell from time to time, but,
So in this podcast, you're uncovering these toxic waste spills, dumps, other kinds of poisoning, minorities and all that kind of really nice things. Have you lost faith in humanity during the process of researching this?
No, it's, weirdly enough, it's actually been the opposite for me, because I have met so many different community members who have been working on getting some of these sites cleaned up for decades. I mean, I talked to people who I was in my 20s and I moved to New Jersey. This was 1970, blah, blah, blah. And I'm still living in this community now, and we're still fighting to get this site cleaned up. And I don't quite understand how somebody can stay in a place like that with the idea of thinking maybe one day it'll get cleaned up. I think I'm too pessimistic for that, where I'd be like, you know what? We tried. It didn't happen. Now let's all try to move out of this community and go somewhere else, maybe where it's safer. But these folks I've met, they are just so strong-willed and determined and super smart. And if I, had any kind of political power in the state of New Jersey, I would hire these folks to work with me on environmental issues. They've really impressed me. And so I think I've had more faith in humanity by talking to them to see what a group of people, just regular normal people, teachers, other folks like that, what they can do when they get together. I mean, they can, I think, do a lot more good than if they would be in politics, actually. But, yeah. I think I have a lot more faith.
So do you find that some of the people that actually cause the spills, maybe some corporations or industrialized places, do they usually try to be the ones that spearhead the cleanup like they do in other kinds of things? Do they say, we'll take care of it? And can we trust them to actually do it?
No, I mean, I'm trying to think of a case where a company tried to spearhead the cleanup, and I can't think of one where a company did that. It is usually community members that are pressuring local government, state government to have the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, come down and investigate. And then that agency will come down, find out, oh, geez Louise, there is so much toxic waste here. And then they'll get it started. I can't think of a company that did it on their own volition.
Yeah. And they also have to be kicked in order to get the money out for the cost of what they did. You really have to squeeze it out of them, shake them by the ankles.
Yeah, you do. And I mean, luckily, recently, so the whole idea of the Superfund, when it was created in 1980, it was the state of New Jersey. It was a politician, a congressperson in the state of New Jersey that spearheaded this whole effort. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of days ago. But former Governor Jim Florio was the person who sort of spearheaded this effort, because he realized New Jersey has a huge industrial past. With that industrial past, we have now a lot of these toxic sites in our state. We need to do something about cleaning it up. The taxpayers should not be responsible for paying to clean these sites up. They had nothing to do with these sites getting toxic. Let's propose a tax on the oil and gas companies and use that tax money from them to be able to clean these sites up, because it's so difficult to find what the EPA calls a potentially responsible party. Trying to find out who actually did pollute this site is extremely difficult to find out for a variety of reasons. So this tax was instated in 1980. Unfortunately, 1995, the fund ran out of money. They weren't going to tax anymore. But recently, this summer, that tax was reimposed. So we got the tax back. But
Cool.
from 1995 to 2022, there was no money in that fund. So they were getting creative, and taxpayer dollars were being spent to clean up some of these sites. So it's been a kind of a mess.
Yeah. I mean, geez. I mean,
literally, figuratively, I guess.
well, I mean, and we say toxic waste a lot. Like, what is toxic waste? Like, so what are some of the things that got dumped, and what do you think was like some of the worst that you could have in your backyard? Or
Yeah. I mean, I was called out by a gentleman when I was on Science Friday talking about this, because he was saying, you're using the word toxic wrong and using the word toxin wrong. And I just kind of was like, roll my eyes. Okay. Nobody knows what a toxicant is, and I'm not even going to get into that. But, obviously you have man-made chemicals, man-made materials that are typically the reason why these sites are polluted. And for those listening, that is not a toxin, that is a toxicant. But in my scripts, I'm using toxin, okay? Because nobody really cares about the other word, like nobody cares. But to your question, that a lot of what you find are, I mean, there, I can just start naming out random chemicals that you usually find.
Let's hear the horrible ones.
Lead, arsenic and arsenic are usually the ones that are most common in these sites. But you have ones that are even worse than that. Like there's one for dioxin. There is dioxin, and those are also carcinogenic chemicals, usually found in places that were like New Jersey. Some of these places were creating things like Agent Orange. So didn't know until I was doing this show that the plant in Newark, New Jersey was the largest producer of Agent Orange in the United States to ship over to use in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War. But yeah, so they were producing Agent Orange, and that led to dioxin, and that is a carcinogen seeping into the river. There is a body of water. You usually find these sites near bodies of water because companies like to put a site there so they can dump their crap in the water.
Oh my God.
That's a common story.
I can contest to that because I grew up in Colorado, and I grew up just in the mountains of the Rocky Mountain. There's a Rocky Mountain Arsenal I grew up next to, where they made mustard gas and Agent Orange and all the other. They had Agent Purple and Agent Green and all these other things, and Soylent Green, and then, but then up in the mountains they had the flats, and they would have these giant pools of water where they're just evaporating this kind of toxic waste all day. So when the remediation of this stuff, how what's the toughest to get rid of, and how long does it take?
The toughest, it seems like, to get rid of is when it does go into a body of water, because I mean, there's a couple of reasons why that some of this stuff, you don't know exactly what the reach is, where these chemicals went, because it was in a body of water and the water moves. So you don't quite know where the chemicals might be in. Other times, though, like the case in Newark, that what they're planning on doing is dredging a portion of the Passaic River that's near this site, and dredging and trying to get as much of this waste as they can out. But they have to be very careful, because once they disturb that waste, it could start spreading those chemicals around in the Passaic River. So that gets very delicate, and that's going to be a multi-million-dollar pursuit to clean that part up. Just the part from the water. We're not even talking about the land that's contaminated, the soil, the groundwater that's contaminated.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so sick that it makes me laugh, but it's just so ironic and so like disturbing how the age we live in, that I can just chuckle mindlessly.
And it was legal. I mean, you got to remember too that when these things were happening, that the companies that were doing this were doing things that most of the time, I should say, were doing things perfectly legally, because we didn't have environmental legislation. We didn't have the Superfund. We didn't have the Clean Air and Water Act in this country. So they were doing it legally. So
you know pretty good about the legislation that got passed in order to regulate the environment over the years historically? What were some of the most significant laws and regulations that got passed for the environment that we can name?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, the Superfund to me is when it comes to cleaning up these sites, is the biggest bill of all. But the precursor to that, New Jersey actually had a state law called colloquially called the Spill Act. And the Superfund just sort of like built on that. I mean, because essentially the Spill Act was like, let's start cleaning up these sites. And they had some like looser regulations on what that cleanup would entail and how it was going to be funded. And the Superfund really just formalized it and made it federal. So now every state would have to follow the Superfund Act. But like, the Clean Air and Water Act, too, obviously precursor to Superfund and the Spill Act, was really important in ensuring that, companies weren't dumping their toxic waste into bodies of water, or at least making it now that it was illegal to do so.
Yeah.
Didn't stop companies and hasn't stopped companies from doing it. But
do you think now companies just see what they have to go through as the cost of doing business?
Yeah, I mean, the I think ridiculous thing is when the states and the federal government started imposing stricter regulation, that in New Jersey in particular, as they started to make it more difficult to contaminate the water and the land, they went to places like Alabama that had looser regulations. And then when federal law came into place, they went to other countries. And so they're in other countries now, these same companies, or they might go under different names because they were bought and sold, went bankrupt, blah, blah, blah. But they're in other countries doing the same thing. It's not like they've stopped. They just moved around.
That stuff's got to go somewhere.
It does. It has to. And, we're ramping up plastics production and stuff. So anyway, It's like, I don't really see it going away.
There's this great video I saw about the Industrial Revolution and how it was really important at the time that consumer culture really take off. And so they started realizing that if you do like little things like a buttery dish or a coat hanger or something like this, like you're selling what they called in those days fripperies, which were frivolous items that have no, what we call today, like cheap plastic stuff that has really no use. And they've built an entire system around this. And I don't know, they had all that in the 1850s, the dumping the stuff, and it was terrible. But America didn't get the memo and decided when it took over, it's like, oh, well, we're going to do the same thing and poison our rivers and do all this. And I've heard stuff over the years. So who are the most like obviously Dow or DuPont? Do they rank pretty high?
Exactly. Yeah. And like DuPont in New Jersey has been problematic. We haven't featured DuPont in any of our episodes yet because where their sites are, their Superfund sites, since the show is looking at the impacts of climate change on Superfund sites, their sites are typically in areas of the state that they're not going to get as hard hit by any climate related things. So, but DuPont for sure is a nasty one. There's a company called National Lead, which we're featuring in our next episode, in episode 5. National Lead has more than one Superfund site, or has had more than one Superfund site in New Jersey. And they've done some really disgusting things to harm the environment. Boo. So, yeah. But yeah, Dow and DuPont are definitely, I would say, the top two. There used to be a company, I think they've changed names now, but I don't remember what they're called. But they're called, back in the day, in the 70s, they were called Ciba-Geigy, and they were in Tom's River. I have a mentor, and I'll plug his book just because he's amazing. He wrote a book called Tom's River, which is a town in New Jersey, and he traces the history of this community and the impacts of what would become this massive Superfund site on the townspeople. I mean, high rates of cancer, rare cancers in children dying from rare cancers. And because of this company that was then known as Ciba-Geigy, that was there polluting the water, polluting the soil. And it just, the last chapter is just like, well, one of the last chapters is so disappointing because he does mention how they just went to China. Like the company is still doing these things just to other people in another country. And it's just like a downer.
It's so sad. Out of sight, out of mind. NIMBY. Exactly. Not in my backyard. Yeah.
And the sad thing too is like the town of Tom's River. I was told recently, you got to do something on Tom's River today because it seems like they forgot that they were the site of this massive Superfund site. they're kind of doing the same old tricks. They want to start redeveloping and bringing in more business and more jobs. Like, these things are cyclical.
Yeah.
And, it's like every generation is going to have to deal with these same things. It's like a playbook that these companies use.
Basically, like, thanks, Grandpa. Thanks a lot.
Exactly. Appreciate your service.
Yeah. So I think I heard somewhere that, old mining towns will dump their stuff in these lakes or rivers and stuff like that. And as climate change is picking up, what happens? It gets hotter. What happens? Do the heavy metals from the thing, do they go into the air or?
Yeah. So one of the episodes, we've only featured one episode that deals with an abandoned mine shaft. And that was in Ringwood, New Jersey. And that case is very interesting, too, because it involves an indigenous group of people that actually live on the Superfund site. Their land became a Superfund site. They're also, unfortunately, the Ringwood Superfund site is the only site that I'm aware of in history, in the Superfund history, to have been a Superfund site, been removed because it was clean, and then put back on the list. And it's still a Superfund site, and they're still working to remediate it. But one of the things that Ford Motor Company, amongst other folks that were doing dumping, they would dump what's called paint sludge. So when cars, back in the day at least, when they would start painting them with the different colors, the paints that would drip down would get collected, and they would dump that in these abandoned mine shafts amongst other places on the property. And kids would play with it because it looks like just a hard rock. Yeah. So they would dump this stuff in the abandoned mine shafts. And what the biggest fear is that with the stuff that's in these abandoned mine shafts, and we don't even have maps that show exactly like the intricacy of the mine shaft underneath. So nobody really knows where exactly all these mine shafts are and like the tunnel system from when it was an operating mine. They don't know the full extent of what that looks like. And when flooding occurs in this area, water going down in those abandoned mine shafts, coming back up, spreading toxic chemicals around, what could happen with that? I mean, the nearby bodies of water in that area are already polluted. There's talks of like, they go hunting, people there. They'll kill a deer. They'll cut the deer open, and like tumors in the deer from eating the vegetation and from drinking the water. Like, how toxic. Like, you can't fish anymore. You can't hunt anymore on this property. You can't grow vegetables. This land is just completely soiled.
Yeah.
But that's like the biggest problem we found with the abandoned mine shafts is like when that water comes up and bringing up whatever is down there. That's the fear.
That's when my faith in humanity just ends right there. When the animals get it in the wildlife and they get it, I think, well, we just are a big disease then with our technology and our, advancements. Oh
yeah. It's very, very disappointing. That whole situation is, so you can also just blame that situation on racism too. So
sure. And this is another whole topic, is the fact that they decide to do it. Like you say, they went down to Alabama where people are less educated or stuff like that. And they pick on weak people, poor people, brown people, black people, anywhere. Now Chinese people, apparently, because whoever will take it,
Yes.
But what are some of the biggest cases where it was really, really obvious what was going on? Like, you didn't need to run any tests or anything, that you knew this is obvious. Like, people are sprouting tumors overnight or just immediately becoming sick.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to the case in Newark, that episode. It's Diamond Alkali is the factory, the company that was doing the Agent Orange, producing the Agent Orange.
Boo.
That there were descriptions where, we saw like old news footage and, old photos in the newspaper where people were noticing this like white dust. There are descriptions of like people in the community pool and like just suddenly this white dust occurs and is on their skin. It doesn't burn or anything like that, but like weird that everyone's getting like this white dust in the neighborhood. All right, so people complain, as you should. What the fuck is this white dust doing? It's just like raining from the sky and it's not snow. So they complain. Nothing seems to happen. One day, people in the community start seeing these people in hazmat suits. They call them the moon suits, okay? People are on their porch smoking a cigarette, sitting, in their tank tops and stuff. Like, you see photos and video, and they're just like, these people in hazmat suits are coming up on their property, digging through soil, taking samples. And they're like, bruh, why are you on my lawn? And they're like, oh, you exist. You're here. Oh, we're taking soil samples because, like, there's been contaminants. And they're like, should I be in one of those suits too? And the guy's just walking away. Like, I don't know. I'm not getting into it. Just walks away, And it's just like the community, that has been like one of the most egregious things where it's like, we've complained about this. We had this white dust. Like, our kids are having higher rates of asthma. People are getting sick here. And you're not telling us anything.
Yeah.
Like, that to me is just like one of the most egregious. Like, you are coming on my property. I didn't even get a notice. You're not even telling me what you're doing here. And if you're in a hazmat suit, why am I just sitting in my shorts?
Really, seriously, should I be scared?
And it took days later for like the public to even get an understanding of why they were taking samples and what sort of chemicals they were testing for, and the governor at the time declared a state of emergency. And they're like, finally, someone's listening to us. But like, you're a little too late.
Yeah. Yep. This is how it works. Well, and there's something about, don't want to cause a public panic or anything, so we won't tell them. And we'll just try
There's a white dust. I mean, that's a public panic. I would be freaking out. Like, why is this dust raining from the sky?
That's nothing to be worried about, folks. That's just some summer snow. It's different. It's new. It's harmless.
It's harmless. Oh.
Yeah.
Well, your kids will be okay.
Yeah. To be fair, though, this is par for the course for any corporation or industry that creates some kind of fucking epidemic and then tries to like backpedal and cover it up and pretend like, oh, right now I was just doing this guy with sugar, fat people, and this whole diet. Oh, I lived through it because I lived through the 90s. And this was like the height of people ballooning up all around me. And it's soda, it's like, what are you going to do? But because of lobbying and because of corporate money, we just have not really ever solved it.
No, and I don't think we are going to, but
now who's got no faith in humanity?
I mean, that's a whole other show topic, talking about sugar and corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, and all of that, the companies that make that. But yeah, I will mention though, like, one of the things that really got me in my reporting and like, things that I was reading is whenever a community wants the state to come and investigate a cancer cluster. So they're noticing a lot of people in my community have cancer. And a lot of the people who have cancer either live near the factory or they work at the factory. And it's so hard to make a connection between the chemicals being produced at a company or a factory and your cancer. And the thing that keeps popping up over and over is companies like to blame, or their lawyers like to blame, the workers or the people's lifestyle choices. So they'll say, you had this rare brain cancer. It's because you smoke and you drink. Oh, yes, I had this rare brain cancer. Yes, it's completely because I smoke or I drink. They'll throw things like that out. Or like, you do these other things. It's usually, though, like they like to hit that if somebody gets cancer from working at one of their factories, they like to hit that you smoke and you drink. It's not our responsibility or problem to help you. You did this to yourself. And this makes me really sad.
And this is the slickness of the lawyers that they hire and the way they do an excellent job of looking for any loophole. Well, the guy from Super Size Me in this documentary, they famously, there was two plaintiffs that got incredibly fat and they wanted to say that they got it from McDonald's food. And they took McDonald's to court, and the McDonald's lawyers got them off on the pretense that people should already know that McDonald's food isn't good for them. That's what the McDonald's lawyers said, and that made it so the judge threw out the case. So this is
that is so evil. Yes.
And to be fair, this happened with Fox News too, when they went on TV and said about hydroxychloroquine and pushed this narrative about this drug. Well, somebody did it, got really badly sick, and then went to sue Fox News. And in court, the lawyer said, everybody should know that Fox News is only there for entertainment. It's not actually news. And they got off.
That baffles me. That is, yep. But it is. It's very similar,
Yeah.
This way of thinking. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why I always say too, like, to one of my colleagues and to other folks, like when I'm doing research or like thinking about questions, talking to certain people, I'm like, I have to put my evil hat on. Like, what are some of the most evil ways of think that I can think of, like, why this would happen, or like why somebody would do this? Just my evil hat's in the closet, and I just put it on from time to time, get in the mindset of some of these folks, like, yeah.
To do the worst. I want to poison minorities. I want to eat as much as I want to eat, and I want to drive the fastest. I want to be the best. I want to go to Africa and kill endangered species. I want to dominate everybody, and I want to make more money than God. That's it. And yeah, I don't understand it myself, but that's the helmet you got to wear to understand these people.
Exactly. And it's like always thinking that, like, we can always move on. There will always be another place that will accept us because we're bringing jobs. We're bringing lots of jobs to a community. Because that's also the same kind of story as company got away with a lot of things because the promise of jobs and of, bringing on economic stability to a community. So, local government, state government might have looked the other way on certain things.
Mm-hmm. But
because of job.
As time increases, though, the corporations move further and further away from even circulating that money outside of just a small group of people. Why do we need to help the community when we can just pay this politician and pay this lobbying group, and then we can just pretty much do what we want? And then we'll keep the wages of the workers down. We'll dump toxic waste in their rivers. And there ain't shit they can do about it. We'll pay the police to protect our property, but then give a fuck about anybody else. This is not just a one town thing. This is an every town thing.
I totally agree. And it's, I've been thinking a lot about that, and thinking, though, like, people shouldn't have to risk their health for a job, like to be able to have money, to be able to put a roof over their head and their family's head, and for food. It's like you are a lot of these cases. Yeah, you lost days of your life. You died by working at a place just to be able to get enough money for, like, the bare basic things that everybody should have in life. It's like so depressing, to think, like, you went to work every day for 12 hours at a place that was poisoning you.
Yeah. I read something where they took a poll of, like, people in nursing homes and in hospices that were dying, and they said, you've lived your whole life. What's the one thing that you regret? And nobody ever said that I didn't spend more time at the office, stuff like this. Most of them said, I wish that I wouldn't have been so afraid to do the thing that I wanted to do. And I wish that I wouldn't have worked so much, is what they all say. There is nothing sadder.
There is nothing sadder. That's why I'm like, oh, geez, God, I gotta do everything. It's like every day. Oh, yeah.
This is why I became a professional hobo, and I just started hopping trains and hitchhiking across the country. It was fun in my 20s, but now I'm too old to do that. So
I was gonna say, even at 32 now, I'm like, I don't know if I could. I don't know. I'd get very tired easy now.
Oh man!
Like every year after 30, I can see it.
I just get grouchy. I was like, I want my comfortable routine. I told her, I fall asleep now. I have to take a nap after lunch. That's how old I am.
I've never been able to take naps, not even as a kid. So,
It'll come, my friend. It'll come.
It'll come. Oh, yeah. Probably at 35. Then suddenly it'd be like, you want to take naps.
You'll be snoozing with like a book on you in the middle of the day. You're just like passed out. Yeah.
Like, what happened? Yeah. 4 hours went by. Like, but yeah, I just, one of the things too that I've been thinking about is, like, I don't think there will ever be an end to this Superfund. That meaning that there are plenty of places that still need to be cleaned up that have taken, 40 plus years to get anyone to, really care about them or care about the site. Like, I don't see people stopping the creation of new sites. That 20, 30 years from now, there'll be places that opened up this year that will be on the list. That's the thing that I'm really wanting to draw attention to with this show, is to have people have a better understanding of what the Superfund actually is, what it's there to protect and to clean up, to prevent future sites from occurring. Like, getting people angry enough and being able to get riled up enough to have, spur some kind of action to look in their community at what sites currently exist. And also, hey, when that new company is proposing building their factory in your backyard, think about the consequences for yourself, your children, and the next generation to prevent new Superfund sites. That's all.
Do you think there's new ones popping up all the time, and is it harder to find and research about them and tell people, or would you start including that at the end and say, look, this happened 20 years ago, but guess what? There's one coming in this state this year, so go call somebody and tell them that you don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's like there are new sites, like even during the course of this podcast, New Jersey added a new Superfund site to the list. And it's the Hackensack Meadowlands, a part of the Hackensack River. And that site, people have known, has been polluted for a long period of time. Just now, though, realizing that, hey, this, we need to get this site cleaned up. But, it's a little bit more difficult when a company just opens up a new factory in your community. To understand how toxic that site is, you typically would have to wait a number of years to be able to, like, hey, EPA, I think something's going on here, or that factory shut down. Can you now come and see if this site warrants cleanup under the Superfund Act? So, I just think that people should just keep an eye out. And also, if they think there's, a site that might be polluted or toxic in their community, a former factory, plenty of sites in Texas people can look up in their communities and see if it warrants the EPA coming out. Like, do some research.
And do you think that these regulatory agencies need a kind of a kick in the shin from normal everyday people in order to do their jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. Like, I really think that it is, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it is up to people like me and you and like regular folks who are not with a government agency or not politicians to be the voice to get them to pay attention. I mean, the EPA is not going, I mean, and rightfully so. It's like the agency's responsibility is not necessarily like monitoring. I mean, there's so many places that potentially could be put on this list. Like, they're not going to be actively looking. It is you to be able to make that connection. There's so many bad things going on. They got a lot of stuff to worry about.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and the way things are going, it looks like you'll have plenty of content if you continue your Hazard USA podcasts. There will be no shortage of stories thanks to short-sighted thinking.
Exactly. It is very short-sighted thinking. Yeah, there's never going to be an end to this. So,
well, I guess we did our 30. She's going to come back. She's going to do it again, folks. I'm going to bother her again. She's going to come back. We're going to have a good time. Check out Tom's River. It's a book she recommends about guys getting toxic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're going to put some links down there. There's 4 more episodes of Hazard New Jersey coming up. It's going to be great. It's going to be the hardest hitting, most shocking ones of all. Superfunds. These are the ways that you fight. And Hazard New Jersey. Check it out. Right? Anything you want to say?
No, just thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming. Jordan Gass Pooré, everybody.